by the end of the semester.
Let's just say you get the concept.
All right. So let me start with the next homework assignment first, and I'll go back and explain the first one, the one that was due earlier.
You did?
I was going to ask, as far as your implementations, if you have already started implementing other things in your RUM module, beyond the ones that you're asking
You can go
for,
beyond, I'm testing individual instructions.
Okay.
So as long as you get that particular one right, in the wrong, you can have, instructions, you can have microcode for all of the other instructions if you want to, and they may be wrong even, but I won't be testing those. I'll just be testing the individual instructions for that particular homework assignment.
Yeah, I'm already done.
So there will be specific test cases just for that. So your new homework assignment is to continue to implement 2 more instructions. I don't think these 2 are any more difficult than the ones that we have to deal with today.
Which one would you say is the most difficult?
I would say the conditional branch is probably one of the more interesting ones because you have to change the PC in some cases and not to change the PC in some other cases. So that would be the conditional branch based on the flags. I think that one is one of the more tricky ones.
It was pretty simple.
You thought it was simple?
The way you guys
Possibly.
implemented, I thought it was simple.
It had to do with how the processor is structured, because different people can structure the processor slightly differently, and it still achieve the same result. So it's just a matter of how do you want to structure the processor to get it done? Okay. So with the new homework assignment due next week, you have 1 week to work on this as well. The first one is moved indirect into memory. Basically, once again, we specify 2 registers. XX is 1 register, YY is another register. And we are using register Y as an address. So we're dereferencing, go to the memory location that Y points to, and then change the content of that location to whatever X register has. So X can be one of the 4 registers, A, B, C, D, and Y can be one of the 4 registers, A, B, C, D as well. So it's kind of the reverse of the other one because we already have one that is X equals to dereference Y. This is exactly the opposite. So the way you work with the memory is exactly the opposite in this case. Now with this one you have to be careful because memory does not change until you have a rising clock edge. So you got to keep that in mind. And then the other instruction is just bitwise not, which is the only unary operation that we have with the ALU. So in many ways, this one should be actually easier than the ones that you have dealt with already because you only got 1 operand in this case. Is that okay so far? Does everybody understand what the new homework assignment is about? All right. So now that we have now that I've introduced the new homework assignment, let's get back to the other one. So I give you the solution to the homework assignment that was due today. All right, so that one is in signed numbers. So there we go. All right. So as I explain the answers to this particular homework assignment, if you guys have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask, because it is important that you ask questions. I am not a mind reader. I cannot just go like, I can see Joey is having a question right now. I cannot tell unless you let me know, So gotta let me know that if you have a question. So let's go ahead and start up the emulator. So we got Java. Well, actually I can go to the folder first. There we go. Yeah, I think some of that is in proc, but some of it is not. Well, we can tell right away whether this is the right one or not. Question? Yep.
Are you recording?
I believe so. Let me just double check. Go to the. Yep. So that's good. Let me check the mic as well. Yep. So we are recording. And there's a secondary question that people really need to ask is, do we have enough space? The answer is we got about 6 gigabytes, which is good for about 3 lectures. So we got enough space, the recorder is on, So we should be good. Okay. All right. So now that we have the infrastructure up and running, so with this particular homework assignment, let me switch to the assignment first. So with this homework assignment, you have to implement. So you have to implement subtraction, compare, and the conditional branch instruction based on the Z flag. So those are the 3 instructions. So it would be kind of more fun to do the subtraction first, because after the subtraction, the Z flag will be set because of the result of the subtraction or the compare. Then we can use the conditional branch. So we can kind of implement 2 instructions and only use 1 test program to test both of them. Okay, compare first and then do a conditional branch. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and implement subtraction first. Okay. Subtraction is based on this particular pattern, which is a 9, and then the XX, YY are 4 bits to specify 2 registers. 2 bits XX specifies the first register, which is also the register to store the result of the subtraction. YY is the other subtractor. It specifies how much we are subtracting from the first register. Is that okay? All right. So it doesn't hurt to go to the actual document as well. So let me go to my Google Documents. Okay. My Google Drive. Come on. And go to the shared folder. There we go. And I think shared is here. And we want to take a look at processor.txt, which is the description of the instructions. So what we're trying to do, the first instruction I want to implement is 1001XXYY, which is this one here. In the previous class, I actually explained what this one is, because x minus equal to y is the same thing as x equals to x minus y. They are really the same thing. One is basically just a shorthand of the other one. Is that okay? All right. Okay. So x is a register, y is a register. X can be A, B, C, D, which means it can go from 0, 0 to 1, 1 as 2 bits. Y can also be A, B, C, D, which means it can also range from 0, 0 to 1, 1 in binary. Is that part okay? Okay. All right. So the first part that is important is to understand what the question is asking. What is the homework assignment asking you to do? So then the second thing we have to do is to look at the schematic of the processor. And then we say, okay, so what do we need to do? The registers A, B, C, D are housed here. That's their home. The register bank, right? So in order to do the calculations, the calculations can only be done up here, which is the ALU. So you need to find a path, okay, so that you can route the output of the register bank, the 2 outputs, I should say, of the register bank to the 2 inputs of the ALU to perform the actual subtraction. And then with one instruction, which is the 9x instruction, 9xxyy instruction, you also have to store the result, which also means the output of the ALU, which is here, needs to route back to the input of the register bank so that you can store the result after a subtraction. Is that okay? So now we just look at the pathways. Okay, we say the first one you need to do is to look into the ALU and say, okay, in the subtraction, which number is being subtracted from which one? So you look at the subtractor here. This is the subtractor. And when you look at the subtractor, the first one, which is the top one, is called the minuend. So that's the number that is being subtracted. And then the second number is called a subtrahend, which is the number to subtract from the first number. Okay? So what if you have absolutely no idea what those words mean and you don't want to look at Wikipedia or Google for the meanings of the words? Happens to me a lot. Okay, I'm not just as lazy as the next person. I'm more lazy than the next person, or I should say lazier. Is it lazier or more lazy? Lazier, right? 2 syllable. Huh?
Never bothered to figure it out. Too lazy.
That's a good one. I like that. Okay, so if I don't know for sure, okay, what do I do? Well, I say new, right? I go to arithmetic, I pull out a subtractor, I pull out some pins, okay, 2 input pins. Well, actually, technically I need 3, so I'll give it 3. Okay, B in is 0 because I don't want to have to mess with that one. And then with these pins, I specify 8 bits, okay, and 8 bits because I think I understand 8-bit numbers. Sorry? So I feed these into here, and then I look at the output using an output pin, also 8-bit wide, right? There we go. So now I say, oh, okay, I understand now. 0 minus 0 is 0. Great, but which one is subtracted from which one? This doesn't tell me, does it? Okay, so I have to make sure that one is not 0 in order to find out which one is being subtracted from which one. Let's just change this one. Okay, let's make it a 1. Okay, so now if we have something minus something being a 1, so now can I tell which one is the number being subtracted and which one is the amount to subtract from the other one?
Yes, because if it was 0 minus 1,
Yep.
ones would be out.
Yep, and this is without looking up any definition of the words that the subtraction gate uses. Okay, so that's how I want you guys to do things. I mean, if it's not clear how things are done, in a subtractor, find out. Okay, design a small experiment and find out for yourself, how it works. I have a kind of nagging feeling that the library in the help is also going to explain that. I haven't really personally looked it up, but let's check out. Okay, so it says,
Upper minus the lower.
yep, right there. So there are many ways to figure out, which one is being subtracted from which one. Okay, so now that we know this, how am I going to use that in the actual design? Well, what that means is this one here, in 1, is the number that is being subtracted, and in 2 is specifying the amount to subtract from in 1. Because when you look at how this one can be potentially routed to the subtractor, and how this one, can potentially be routed to the subtractor, it is pretty clear that we are calculating in 1 minus in 2. The output is in 1 minus in 2. Now that is important because the instruction is directional. You cannot flip x and y. They have to be in a particular order. Okay, so now that we know this, then we know that in 1 needs to come out of out 1, which is this guy. In 2 has to come out of out 0, sorry. So in 1 has to come out of out 0, and in 2 has to come out of out 1. Is that okay? Sorry? Nope. Because out 0 goes to the demux.
I was thinking on the demux.
Oh, okay. Then the demux feeds to in 1. And then same thing happens here. Out 1 goes to the demux, and then the demux feeds to the ALU. Is that okay? Are there any questions right now? Yep.
When you're setting, when you're assigning the program counter to a value or register, does the address max really matter? Because you're not directly dealing with RAM. Is there any reason to prioritize an address max with a value of 1 over 0? Because that's what's driving the address bus in the RAM. But we're not directly dealing with RAM.
We are not dealing with RAM at all when we are subtracting. So we are not accessing RAM.
When you assign the PC to a value of a register, let's say A, B, C, or D. Because say if we had a subtraction instruction that set the Z flag to 1, then our next instruction would be to set a value in, say, register A, B, C, or D to the program counter. Our next instruction would have to be at the address of the value of the register, because if the Z flag is 1 in the PC, the program counter is assigned the value.
Not necessarily, because the program counter has many ways to be updated. This is the program counter itself. So when you look at the input into the program counter, okay, first of all, the program counter enable, which is this guy here, is directly controlled by one of the bits out of the microcode ROM. In other words, I can always make this a 0, make PCEN, PC enable to be a 0. Then it doesn't matter what you do, the program counter is not going to update. So if you make PCEN a 0, then it really doesn't matter what you do with PCMux or PCMux because it's not going to get updated. Is that okay? Or so I think I see there's a probably not a confusion, but and some people are maybe neglecting all the pins that are going into a register. So EN is enable, and that is the pin that you need to turn into a 1 in order for a register to be updated on the rising clock or falling clock, depending on how the register is set.
Right.
So as long as you have the enable pin to be off, to turn, as long as you turn off the enable pin, the register is not going to update.
So we wanted to update for the
branch instruction.
Branch.
Yeah, but we are not talking about the branch instruction just yet. We are talking about the subtraction instruction right now.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. But remember that question. If you have a question about the branch, remember that one. When we get to it, then we'll talk about that one. Okay. Okay. So getting back to the subtraction instruction. Okay. So now that we know what the subtraction instruction needs to do, route out 0 to the demux, demux 1 into the input 1 of the ALU. We want output 1 to go to the demux, and then we want output 1 of this demux to go into the ALU. We want the output of the ALU to go into the mux, back into the register bank, and we also want to enable the input into the register bank and be able to select which register inside the register bank should be updated. So those are the things we have to kind of think about, and now we can go to the spreadsheet to kind of work out, okay, so what exactly do we want for each bit of the 26 bits of each slice of the microcode? Is that okay or not? Okay? All right. Before I go any further, are there any questions about the processor design schematic itself? Are there any symbols in the schematic that you want me to clarify? Because that really is spelling out how the processor works. So what we are trying to do with a ROM is to say, okay, we're just orchestrating. We're just saying, okay, sequencing, the operations. Yes?
I think I just figured it out.
Okay, well that's a good thing. Do you want me to?
I was just a little bit confused about the register input enable, and I see how it's enabling the mux at the same time that it's enabling the register.
Yes. So inside a register bank, register input. Oh, this is the input enable. So the input enable is really just enabling the decoder. And so in order to find out what does it really do, then you have to look at the decoder. And the decoder is basically saying, do we want to include enable? Yes. And what happens to the output, the disabled output? They're all going to be zeros. So if the output is disabled, it is a 0, it is not floating. Okay? So that means when you disable when you put a 0 into the enable pin, then all 4 outputs are going to be zeros. Is that okay?
Yeah, I was just, it just took me a second to realize that it was enabling the mux on the outside as well.
It is, let me see.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so the input enable is also enabling the mux on the outside, because otherwise I don't need this wire to really have any data presented, because I'm just going to ignore it anyway, right?
So then, as far as we are concerned, while you don't have to deactivate the mux, we are, because they tie into the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because it doesn't really matter if I turn off input enable to the register bank, then whatever the mux is doing is irrelevant anyway. So you might as well turn off the mux too, so that you're not exercising as many transistors unnecessarily. So that makes the processor runs a little bit cooler. I can make the difference between a Nexus versus an iPhone. your virtual reality, app, doesn't burn up the phone anymore, right? I mean, how many people have that rig turning your phone into a virtual reality thing? Does it heat up?
Yeah. To the point where I think it's gonna melt. I created a cooling device for my phone and it's still hot.
But I think that the S7's cool a lot better than like the first one that I got was the S6, and that thing got hot quick. But the S7 wasn't half as bad.
Note 4 and my thing like.
Well, that's because because in one design they have a enable pin going to the mux, and the other one just says, "Hey mux, you just keep yourself busy all the time."
So what about the Note 7?
Sorry?
What about the Note 7, the one that blows up?
That's a bad battery.
Well, lithium-ion batteries are dangerous to begin with because they do have a liquid or fluid in the inside. So anytime you heat up fluid, what does it do?
Expands.
Well, technically in physics it's called phase change, right? Phase change, which means it becomes gas, right? So it builds up pressure, and at some point, the containment cannot, contain the pressure in the inside anymore, and it ruptures and causes either a small explosion, or you just hear the hiss sound because the rupture is small enough that it doesn't break open the entire thing. I've done it, so I know. Yep.
It's a federal crime to bring a Note 7 onto an airplane.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
I did not joke.
So they're worried that somebody might stick it to the window of an airplane and use it as a small, explosive device or something like that.
No, because
Let's do is plug it in and out.
That's my hand warmer. It's cold outside. All right, so getting back to design here. Okay, so now we need to work out all of the control signals, all the control pins. And that's what we need to do next. Are there any questions about the process, how I approach the problem? Because I start with what needs to be done, okay? Something needs to happen here, something needs to happen here. And then I look up the wiring. It's like, okay, we need this to have something, but this can only get something out of this, which is coming out of here. I need this to get something out of the demugs, but that is fed by output 1 of the register bank. I also know that the output is useful because I need to store the result, and I need to store the result back to here, so that means I need this wire to also have the result after the calculation. That's how I start, okay? I start with the objective of the instruction. Then I work my way back and say, okay, which components are useful? Well, okay, these components are important. How are they connected? I track down the wires through the demuxes, okay, or the muxes. Then I know, okay, these components are active. What about the other ones? What about RAM? Oh, it's not involved in this whole process. Okay, so it can be whatever, turn it off. Okay, don't let it do anything. What about the program counter? Nope, doesn't do anything. Just leave it alone, don't work with it. What about the instruction register? Not important in this instruction, just leave it alone. Okay? So we have to identify what components are actually in use with this instruction, and then we work with, okay, but how are they connected? They're always usually just connected by muxes or demuxes. So we have to identify which ones are connected, and do they have a individual enable pin? Okay, because if they do, we need to enable. And also, how do we specify the select pins? Okay, which one of the output do we want? Which ones of the input do we want? So those are the things that kind of go through my mind when I work out the microcode instructions. Is that okay or not? No. Yes. Kind of. Okay. All right. So getting back to here, I can now work with the spreadsheet. So let me go back to the spreadsheet here. All right, so in the spreadsheet, I'm going to start with a new instruction here. And I don't want to do, A equals to A minus A, because, that's not very exciting. So let's go ahead and do at least, A equals to A minus B, okay? So that we can actually have a different result than 0. Okay, so to do that, we want to look at microcode pointer reset, okay? Well, we probably don't want to do that, do we? Because that's just going to reset the microcode pointer back to 0, which is, oh, let's go get the next instruction. Not time to do that yet, okay? At the very last instruction, we want to do that. Microcode pointer select, we want that to be a 1, because we still want it to increment. We want to move on to the next microcode instruction. PC enable is a 0, because we don't want to change the program counter at all. PC mux is not important because we are not changing the program counter itself, so it can be anything, doesn't really matter. Yep.
Would that, does it must use transistors?
Yes.
So if you put a 5 in there and then you keep running a 5 over and over again, it use more power to get hotter, right?
Yep. Well, okay, that's an interesting question. If I use 5 kind of as a default when we don't use the PC mux, as long as you use a particular default, it will still lower power consumption, because power is not consumed when it is in a steady state. If it's always 5, maintaining that 5 doesn't really use a lot of juice. It's transitioning that use of juice. So if you use 5, if you randomize, then it will basically use the most amount of power because it keeps changing even though it's useless. Now, if it's a 5 and it's useless, but you use 5 as a default for being useless, then for most instructions, it will just stay as 5. And staying as a 5 or 1, 0, 1 in binary does not use up a whole lot of energy. Yep.
So that whenever you use 5 for months, it will always be like 0?
No, I'm just ignoring, I'm not letting the program counter to update anyway, so it doesn't really matter what PC mux is specifying.
Right.
But I don't want to change PC mux all the time, because that would just change the multiplexer.
Right, and so for the pointer reset, I was kind of confused. So when does it trigger 1 again? When does it go to 1? So right
wait,
now.
okay. When does what go to 1?
The pointer reset.
The pointer reset, this one here?
Yeah.
When you are done with the microcode of the current instruction, then you want this to be 1, so you go back to location 0 in the ROM to fetch the next instruction.
And then that instruction would be the next thing basically tell it to do, right?
It will grab the next instruction in RAM, the next opcode in RAM, and try to execute it. So, but until you're done with this instruction, you don't want to do that, right? Okay, so the first slice of every instruction probably does not want this to be 1, because if this is a 1, that is immediate. It doesn't really go through the rest, because as soon as this 1 is presented on the wire, it will immediately reset the microcode pointer.
Yeah, it's usually for the end of the.
It's at the very end of each instruction, exactly. Okay, address mux. Well, we don't really care because we are not using RAM in this case. So keep it as a default. So if I use 0 as a default for not in use, I'll just keep that 0. ALU operation is important. ALU enable is important, so we want to put a 1 here. But ALU op depends on which operation do we want to perform. So we want a subtraction, right? If you want a subtraction, then you want this thing to be active. But in order for this thing to be quote-unquote active, we have to look at how the multiplexer works to get the result of the subtraction out to the output. And this is output 1. This is, or I should say, input 1. So the selection pin should be a 1 for the operation of the ALU. So we should put a 1 over here. Oops, a 1 over here. All right. So this is all stuff that is important, because register bank output 1 demultiplexer is what is determining what is feeding into the ALU. Okay. So we want this to be a 1, because according to the schematic, I'll switch to that slide next. So according to this schematic, when you go back to the main design of the processor, what feeds into in1, oh, this is actually in2, sorry. So what feeds into in2 is the output of this demultiplexer. And this demultiplexer is fed by output 1 of the register bank. So this select pin here needs to be a 1 in order for this output to connect to this input. So getting back to the spreadsheet here, this needs to be a 1. Now, what about the selection of register 1? Register 1 is the one that specifies the amount to subtract from the other register. In this case, it is B. B is 0, 1 in binary, or just 1 when we look at the value. Register 0 is kind of the same deal when we look at the demux, because it specifies what goes into in 1 of the ALU, which is going through this mux here. This is output 1. So we need to specify a 1 over here. And then register output 0 select is basically our register A, which is the bit pattern 0, 0. So in here we just specify a single 0. And we do want it to be enabled, because otherwise, all of that stuff is not useful at all. Register input select. Okay, can I answer your question?
No.
No? Okay. Because if I can hear you, so can people in front of you.
Yeah.
So, if you have a question, I'm more than happy to kind of address that. Is there anything I can? No? Okay. All right. So input. This is register bank input select. Okay. In other words, which register in the register bank is getting updated? Well, according to this, is A, which is 0, 0 in binary, which is 0, just 0 as a value. Okay. Register input enable is basically saying, okay, now that you have selected which one you want to update, do you really want to update it? Yes. So let's enable that. Register input mux is important because there are several ways to feed into the input of the register bank. We have to pick the right one. So we are looking at the output of the register bank and say we want this to update the register bank. It's going through this mux here, and we want 1, to select, this particular input to go to the input of the register bank. So we want a 1 in this place. This stuff does not really matter. We are not using RAM at all, so we just pick, whatever default is the one that we want to use. RAM select is a 0, and in the instruction register enable should be a 0 because other than the fetch operation, nothing really should change that. So now we can just copy and paste from cell C to all the way to the end. Copy and paste. That should give us the correct answer. Okay, so it's 151D498. And where's my little post-it thing? There we go. So we'll go ahead and copy. Oops. And my post-it. Paste. And then switch back to my processor design, go to the ROM. Edit content. And once again, but where am I going to do, where in the ROM should I put this particular slice of microcode instruction?
This is where I got stuck.
At 9.
Okay, so
0, 0.
it's 9, 1, 0.
Oh, I didn't know which one you were implementing. And the 9s, it's all the 9s.
Okay, because the one that we're trying to implement, according to this, okay, is A equals A minus B. Okay, so register A is taking the place of XX, register B is taking the place of YY. The instruction is 1001 XXYY, right? So the 1001 is a constant 9, okay, so we know it starts with a 9. XX is 0, 0, YY is 0, 1, so it's a 9, 1.
What if y is 0, 0 is wrong?
Then it's not 0, 0.
if YY is also 0, 0 or register A, then we have 9, 0, 0.
Okay. So
Yep.
for 6 implementations, you have to do the first one as 900, then 910, 920, 930, blah, 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 all the way to 910.
Right.
Hmm?
For all the implementations.
For all the implementations, you have to kind of change just a few
numbers,
bits.
yeah.
Yep. So we go to the location 910. So 910 is over here, and then we need to, oops, paste it. And paste doesn't work, and that's why I need to do this. And we want this to be sticky, so always on top, like that. Now we can actually just hand copy it 151 D498. Okay. What else do we have to do? Is there anything I need to do after 1 clock cycle?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you don't technically have to do it, but you should do it.
Like what?
You should tell it that on the next clock to go down and look at 9:2.
To go to 9.
No, you should have it
Yours is
set.
laid out differently.
You should have it reset
Nine,
itself so it can
nine,
give you the
one,
next
eight.
instruction.
Yep, we're done. We're done with this instruction. Okay,
Not
so
cycling through each one.
what do you mean by cycling each one? Cycling each one of what?
Right here. Yeah.
Yeah, that number.
You're not automatically going to 9-1.
What does that number do then?
Which number?
2000.
It goes all the way back to 0.
It lets you find out what you're doing next.
Okay.
Because the,
Okay.
because the microcode at location 0 is the fetch specification. So that is the portion where it will read the RAM location where PC or the program counter is pointing to, put it into the instruction register, decode it, and say, okay, let's see where we're supposed to go in the ROM for the next instruction.
So if
So we got it right, but we
Had
had
the
a
wrong
different
reason.
different reason for putting a 2000.
I thought we were doing everything in succession. Like in this one, in this one.
You can do it in succession. In other words, you can enable the output of the register bank first, do nothing with the ALU or the input of the register bank, then you proceed to do the calculations, then you proceed to store the result. You can do all that in separate steps, but it's not necessary. So your instruction would just be taking more clock cycles, but they can be combined into one single clock cycle.
I think what he meant is that they were going to do A minus equals A, then they were going to do A minus equals B, then they were going to do A minus equals C, all the way down to D minus equals D.
Well, the next
Yeah,
one,
That was
Succession.
that was the reason, but so we still got it right. We just didn't.
But now
Okay.
I get how this is actually code
well, the
programmed
question is
now.
when I
Yeah.
test your program, is it going to work? Okay, just
Okay.
because you have to specify correctly. If you're at the wrong location, then it won't work.
Check your email.
No. Where did you send it to?
Send it to the same email you replied to in the actual question.
Which is?
TAC.
Because I have one email address per semester. You got to use the one for.
DRTAK 2016 spring@gmail.com.
It's kind of cold outside.
I just typed in TAC and then
Okay, you got to use the one for this semester because I don't check the other ones. That's the whole reason why I have one new one per semester.
forward you my email, but I sent it like 11:32 p.m. That's why you didn't reply.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that 2000?
Yes. It is a 2 followed by
I
all
find it.
zeros.
Did you make that change or was it?
Huh?
Did you make that change?
Yeah, I just wrote it. I just typing in a little bit earlier.
That one makes sense.
Okay.
But he's not gonna be able to
Okay, so here's a question, but I reverse the order. Okay, this is the first slice of which instruction? 920. It's the first slice of which instruction?
C minus
A equals A minus C.
Yep.
And then it will look very similar to this one, except for I guess only 1 bit. Okay, it should only differ by 1 bit. When you are moving on to, let's see, 9, anything that changes the most significant 2 bits of this particular hexadecimal digit. So we are talking about 9, 4, 5, 6. No, 9, 4. No, 9, 8 to 9F. Okay, so when you're working with instruction that starts with 9, 8 to 9F, then you have to change 2 bits at a time. because when you change the A, you're also changing the other A. Okay, remember A equals A minus B, right? There are two mentionings of A. What if you want to change that A to a C? What if you want to change it to C equals C minus B? There are two bits, or two bit things that you have to change in that case. Okay? Are there any questions about this particular opcode or this particular microcode specification? No questions? Yes?
Actually, can you go over one more time? Why do you have 200 again? I understood how you got the 5 zeros. Yeah.
Okay, so that one is just a spreadsheet thing. Because once I'm done with this instruction, then the next instruction only has to do, all it wants to do is to go back to the beginning and do the fetch again. So let me move this one out of the way. Okay, click it. Okay, so the next instruction is really just saying, okay, the only thing I want to do is to reset the microcode pointer. But everything else should be zeros.
Right.
And that ends up with a 2 and then followed by 6 zeros in hexadecimal. That's how I ended up with that pattern.
Okay.
Which is also what we did with all of the other instructions that we have done. Okay. Well, how do we test it? Now that I have a suspicion that this might be the right answer, how do I test it?
You gotta load the register.
Well, there are
Some values.
3 things we need to do to test it. Okay, the first one is to write the instruction as a single byte into RAM. Okay, because that's where the instruction is fetched. So that's the first step. Second step is to go into the register bank and you basically inject some values into A and B. Okay, so that we can actually see whether the subtraction happens or not. Then we can go ahead and execute instructions. Yep.
So, is that what we did in class the other day? The fetch code?
Yep.
I didn't use the
Now it's starting to make sense.
I just put.
And now it's not too late either. Now it's not too late. It's better now than after exam 2. This is before exam 2. It's still good. Yep.
What will be on the exams too?
Exam 2 is going to cover everything mostly after exam 1 up to where I say, okay, this is the cutoff of exam 2.
What kind of stuff is like? Will we be? How will you be testing? Like, will we have to implement a microcode or?
I haven't decided yet. Most of the times we have some microcode, test or microcode, question. It can come in, I guess, at least one of 2 forms. One is, I want to do this. I will give you the description of how I want the registers to be updated, and you have to come up with a microcode to do it. Or the other way around, I give you the microcode sequence, and then you tell me what the sequence is going to do. The end result of the sequence. So it can be one or the other.
It's way easier than the other way.
Or I can give you something to debug. I can say, this is what it is supposed to do, but it's not doing it, fix it.
Oh, that's just wrong.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
No,
This is
no,
wrong.
it's not fun, Chad. That's just mean.
But that question will be preceded by, is there anything wrong with the design? Check it first.
Oh.
Be here for a while.
Be for a while. No, but it's gonna have there'll be something related to microcode because it is an important topic, so that we understand what happens inside the processor. Okay. All right. So let's go back to this one and check whether it works or not. Okay. So we go back to. Okay, we can get rid of this one. This is just for testing purposes. So we get rid of this one, and we have this one, and it's probably a good idea to save it occasionally. So I'm going to save this one to processor this time. So I'm going to save it to downloads, processor, and we want to save it to, what's the name of it? Was it processor.rom?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so we save it. Okay, just in case something happens to Logisim, we don't want to lose this. Okay. All right, so I'm not going to replicate this instruction until I verify that A equals A minus B is working, because otherwise I'll just be replicating the wrong code 16 times, then I have to, 15 times, then I have to fix it 15 times when you'll find out there's a problem, right? So it doesn't make sense to replicate before I check. All right, so when you run the simulator, the first thing we want to do is to say, hey, let's go ahead and reset the whole thing. Then we program in the single instruction that we are testing. This is how your code is going to be tested, is to just test one single instruction at a time. So this is...
Cram that into the code pointer, right?
You could, but but I would like to execute it from RAM. So I'm just going to specify a 9-1 here. Subtracting 0 from 0 is not really a whole lot of fun, nor can it tell me really whether the mechanism is working or not. So I need to go into the RAM, go into the register bank, and put something over here. Okay, so let's put, I'm just going to pick some random values here. Okay, 6.2 is in register A, and we'll pick D7 in register B. Okay, so we want to find out what's going to happen. Well, I just lied. I don't want to find out what is going to happen. I want to know exactly what is supposed to happen, and then compare what I think should happen to what really is going to happen.
Aren't you going to get a negative number in this case?
It's bitwise operation. We wouldn't go negative. We just set flags, and there are only zeros and ones, no negatives, right?
I see.
Yep. Okay, so let's go ahead and carry out this particular subtraction first to find out what it is supposed to be. Okay, it's a quick one. So we have 6.2 minus D7. Okay, do we want to do this in hexadecimal, or do we want to do this in binary?
Let's do it in binary. Binary math is...
I was looking forward to doing it in hexadecimal because it works too. I mean, it's just base 10, a little bit longer. And then the D is a 1101, and the 7 is 0111. It's a subtraction. 0 minus 1 is a 1 with a borrow. 1 minus 1 is a 0. 0 minus 1 is a 1 with a borrow. 0 minus 1 is a 1 with a borrow. So 1 minus 1 is a 0. 0 minus 0 is a 0. 0 minus 1 is a 1 with a borrow. 0 minus 1 is a borrow with a 1. 1 minus 1 is a 0. 1 minus 0 is a 1. 1 minus 1 is a 0. 1 minus 1 is a 0. 0 minus 1 is a 1 with a borrow. There we go. So I'm suspecting the answer is 8D. No, that's a B.
C.
That's a B.
That is a B.
B.
That's a B. With a carry of 1. Z flag of a 0 because the end result is not a 0. What about the sign flag?
Sign flag is a 1.
Sign flag is a 1. The overflow flag is
A 1.
It's a 1 because we start with a non-negative number. We subtract a negative number from that, and ending up with a negative number. So overflow is going to be a 1. What about the L flag, which is the exclusive OR between the sign and the overflow? Exclusive OR means
One or the other, but not both.
only one can be a 1, right?
L flag 0.
No, that's going to be a 0. Okay, so we now know what we can expect out of the operation. Then we can go back in and test whether that is actually going to happen or not. Now this is the part where you can zoom in and zoom out if you want to, because you can zoom out to the main design and do the Control T to single step, or you can zoom in into the ALU to see what is going on inside the ALU. I would do the outside first and then zoom in when it's the right time. Yep, go ahead.
What did you put into RAM?
9-1 at location 0.
And that was it?
We just signify where.
9-1 is the
Oh, the
instruction
ROM. Yeah,
that
where in the
tells
ROM
you
it's at.
so
Okay.
it has
With
with
the
it.
0, you get to 910.
Yep, you pad a 0 on the right hand side, then you end up with 910. Yep, okay, so let's go ahead and, well, we want to track down the execution of the microcode instruction as well. So let's focus on the microcode instruction first. Control T, and then when I do another clock, it should go to location 910 in the ROM. There we go. All right. So now that we're at location 910 in the ROM, we want to check and see whether the ALU is getting the right kind of input or not. Input 1 should be the 01100010. Okay. And let's check input 2 to the ALU. It is 1101 10111. So we got the right inputs into the ALU. We want to check the output of the ALU. It is 1011. Okay, same as what we did by hand. So far so good. And we can also check the flags. But to check the flags, you can check it here or you can check it later. Check it elsewhere because
Flag is 0, 1,
It just has
1.
nothing
it
to
reads,
flags
it reads
registered.
backwards. Okay, so this is 0, 1, 1, 0, 1. Okay, so it does match everything that we are talking about. I can remember this sequence because this is the usual way that I always order the flags. So it's always CZ, SOL. Okay. Okay.
Crazy
Cool.
and shallow left.
Sorry?
Crazy, shallow left.
Oh, okay.
Crazy, what did you say?
SOL.
Crazy SOL?
Yeah. It's an easy way to remember it.
Crazy son.
Well, I guess if you're religious, SOL can be Son of Lord.
I've never actually heard that movie.
I actually had a classmate when I was in high school, and we always call him SOB
Oh, man.
because he really was son of a bishop.
I should just start saying that.
Because in Hong Kong, they use the Anglican Church, which is actually kind of like almost an exact copy of the Catholic Church. So they also have bishops and whatnot. So his father was actually the bishop, in Hong Kong. So we just call him the SOB, son of a bishop. But we usually say it very quickly.
My question is kind of related to this, but
Yeah.
for my Logicsim, every time I throw information into my ROM to save it, it would corrupt the file. I even tried deleting everything, downloading everything all over again, and then redoing everything all over again, and it still corrupted the file. Everything.
Did you leave at least one instance of Logicsim running while you're doing that? Because Logicsim may be sharing libraries or certain types of data when you have multiple instances running.
It's just I even tried with just opening the first thing and then just opening processor, clicking ALU, clicking register, all brand new, go right into register, edit content, add everything, then save, and then close it out, and then try to open it again.
That is kind of hard.
Yeah, I tried 7 or 8 times straight through, and then
Okay.
finally that's what my email's about.
Okay. Well, we can try to look into that in the lab because you need it to be working to work on your second assignment, so we will need that. But getting back to here, okay? So the ALU has the right input, has the right output, but are we going to store the result into register A correctly? So we want to look into register bank and say, okay, let's clock a few more times because now we need to clock one more time for it to update to be 8B, which is the correct result. So we got everything done here. Okay, and to zoom back out after this one, we should go back to location. We should go to the next location in RAM, which is a no op instruction. Yep, go ahead.
So you have to clock it twice?
Well, the clocking is just so that we can move the microcode pointer to the next microcode instruction, which is a 2 followed by 6 zeros, and that's how we end up to move on to the next instruction.
So register A wasn't updated to the new value until we went to the next.
No, because every time I click, every time I do a control T, it is only doing one transition. In other words, one control T for the rising edge, one control T for the falling edge, one control T for the rising edge. The rising edge is what is updating register A to 8B. The falling edge is what is incrementing the microcode pointer to the next slice, where we specify a 2 followed by 6 zeros, and that's how we got back to location 0 of the microcode ROM, where it is going to address the next location and say, okay, give me the next instruction, let me decode it.
I guess what I'm wondering is, does everything happen simultaneously on the first clock?
Yes. on the first clock, the way we specify the bits in that slice, those are all simultaneous.
So we are able to take A and B, subtract them, and then bring them all the way back into A simultaneously?
Well, the updating part is not simultaneous. The updating part relies on the rising edge of that clock.
So that the update will happen on the next.
The moment the bit pattern is presented to all the various wires, the multiplexers, demultiplexers, they all work without edges, right? They're all level sensitive. So the moment you enable a demultiplexer or the moment you enable a multiplexer, they become active. They do their stuff, okay? But when you want to update a register, you need a rising edge of the clock in order to update the register. So that's why you see everything updated. The ALU got the job done.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding what exactly the rising edge means.
Rising edge means the clock goes from 0 to 1.
Okay.
So only at that instant, the register updates.
Okay.
Okay?
So
Okay, so the description can be found here. So if you want to kind of look into this, it might be helpful. Okay, when you go to the register description, it will tell you, when the register is going to be updated. It says right here, when the clock input indicates the value. So when you look at the pins, and you look at the clock pin, clock input, at the instant that this input value rises from 0 to 1 for the rising edge, the register's value will be updated to the value of the D input. So that's what it is. It's edge sensitive, or rising edge sensitive in this case. Okay?
So when does the D input update?
The D input in this case is updated by the ALU. I set up all the paths already. When the clock is a level 0, I set up all the paths, right? The ALU is working. It's only when the clock goes from 0 to 1, then the output of the ALU, which currently has the value that we want, is now used to update the register.
So the register is technically updated when we go to the second instruction.
The register updates when we have a rising edge at the clock pin. The clock goes up, the clock goes down, the clock goes up. So it's when you have the enable pin turned on, and then you have a rising edge, the clock goes from 0 to 1, then the register updates. Okay, this is something that you can probably experiment, using a very small design, and this is also something that was already in the music clock, the music box homework assignment. So you might want to refer to that one too. Okay, but we kind of have to move on to the next instruction. So the next instruction that you need to implement in your homework assignment is the conditional branch instruction. Okay, yes, we have the compare instruction too. All right, let's do the compare instruction because that's the easy one. Okay. The compare instruction, so let me just do the really lazy one. Okay, the lazy one is just A minus B, but without storing the actual result of A minus B. Okay. I call this one really lazy because it involves
Being very lazy.
it involves a lot of work. Basically, copy paste. There's only one thing we need to change. What do we need to change here? We're not storing anything, so RI select or RI enable should be a 0. Just turn this into a 0, and we're done. Literally, really, because all we're gonna do is exactly the same thing. We want to exercise the ALU. We want to perform the subtraction. We want to route the outputs of the register bank to the input of the ALU, and the ALU will do its thing, do the computation and whatnot. It's just that we don't care about the actual result. But we still set the flags, okay? That's the important part, is we are still setting the flags so that we can do the conditional branch instruction. Yep.
Can I rephrase my earlier question regarding the conditional branch?
Okay, so now we're working on the conditional branch.
My question was not really in particular to the microcode, but say you have a subtraction instruction that set the z flag to 1, and now when you go to the next instruction, which say is a conditional instruction, the PC is now at 0, 2, right? In the ramp, assuming I'm occupying the correct locations. But in our ramp configuration, after that conditional branch instruction, whatever that PC is taking, that value from
it skips
register
one
A-
instruction. It skips one location. Is that what you're talking about?
No. No, I'm talking about like say, if I wanted the PC to take the value from say register D in the conditional branch, then my RAM would have to be configured. The next instruction in the RAM would have to be at the location of the value of the register D, because that's what's the PC. So I'm going to be skipping a ton of, depending on what the value.
Exactly.
Okay,
It gives you
that
the
was the problem.
flexibility to skip a whole bunch of instructions, yes. So that's the whole point of a conditional branch or any branch instruction, is you get to decide where do you want to continue execution in RAM. If you continue execution at an earlier location, it is a loop. If you continue execution at a later point, it can be a part of a conditional statement, because you're skipping the then portion of a block and skipping to the else portion of a conditional statement.
So we're using like this, code to control the value of the registers.
Are we using?
Like in the future, are we controlling the values of the registers the same way?
Well, in this little micro architecture, yes, we are, but in the i386 architecture, that is not the case. So there's a differentiation between this architecture, which is a really RISC architecture, and the i386 architecture, which is pretty much the poster child of CISC. CISC. Okay, what is RISC and what is CISC? We talked about this. Reduced instruction set computer for RISC, and then CISC stands for complex instruction set computer. Yep, exactly. Very good. Okay, so let's move on to the next instruction. And let me see, where's my assignment is right here. So we want to do the conditional branch instruction. We want to do this particular one, which is 1011XX11. Okay, so when we look up the sheet here that talks about, okay, what does it actually do? This is the one that depends on the Z flag to determine whether to branch or not, okay? So we are trying to implement this instruction here. This is actually your homework assignment. All right, so remember I changed this description in class because it used to be without the second part. As it turns out, without the second part is actually more clear, okay? This is actually more clear, but we'll talk about it. So what this instruction is really trying to do is to look at the value of the Z flag. If the Z flag is a 1, and only if the Z flag is a 1, we want to update the program counter to the register X that we specify here. So XX, once again, are 2 bits, right? We go from 00 to 11, so that we can specify register A all the way up to register D, and use a register in the register bank to update the program counter. And by doing that, we are altering the path of execution. We are no longer executing the very next instruction, unless X turns out to be the address of the next instruction, which is 7. Okay, usually don't do that much. Is that okay? What if Z does not equal to 0?
Just go on.
Just update the program counter.
Well, technically speaking, we just do nothing because program counter is already at the next instruction, so you don't want to add 1 in that case.
I was just saying that what this program is doing.
Right, exactly. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and implement this instruction. But the first thing we want to see, we want to do is to say, okay, it involves what? It involves the program counter. It involves a register. We want to update the program counter with a register. We also want to look at the register Z to see whether we should update it to the register or not. Okay, so those are the things that we need to remember when we get back to the schematic of the processor in order to figure out what components do we need and how are these components connected. All right, so the first thing is the program counter, this guy, right? So the program counter needs to be updated, but well, only sometimes, okay? So that means that we have to use this, okay, the multiplexer, in order to determine, do we want to update the program counter or not? Well, what controls the mux? PC mux, right? But PC mux is the output of PC of this particular multiplexer, which in return is controlled by PC mux mux. Now this is where I made some modifications. Since the previous class, I sent an email through the news forum to everybody in class and say, download the new file, save your ROM file, download the new file, and then reload your ROM file so that you can use the updated processor design, but still keep your own ROM file. Okay, I sent an email regarding that. Okay, so this is a slight modification so that when the flag is a 0, it's not going to change the program counter. Okay, it will just kind of maintain the program counter as is. Okay, and I have this new flag here, PC increment, which is going back to PC increment here. It is using the carry in to specify whether we should add one or not. Okay, all right. So we have this piece here, we have this piece here, and then we also want to look at the Z flag out of the registers. So we are looking at the Z flag out of this wire, and the Z flag is bit 1, which is this 0. So that's the one that we want to use to determine, do we want to update everything using the other register or not? So that one is this one here, okay? So that says one thing, PC mux mux has to be a 1. Is that making any sense? Okay, so PC mux mux has to be a 1, but we also want to be able to update the register in case we want to update it. So if we want to update the program counter, okay, this is the program counter, this is the input into the program counter, it goes through a mux. This wire is not useful for updating it to be another register or using another register to update it. This wire does, okay? So we follow this wire, it goes to the demux of output 0. So that means out of the entire register bank, the one thing that we need to specify is, okay, what goes out of output 0 of the register bank. That becomes important. Okay? So now that we have identified all of these components, we can now go to the spreadsheet and see if we can work out the details of that spreadsheet. Okay? So with this one, I will leave it blank here just so that we can do the other one. So we want this one to be PC equals X if and only if Z equals 1. Okay, that's the instruction that we are trying to implement. And we go all the way back to the beginning. We do not want to reset the microcode pointer. We do want to just increment the microcode pointer by 1 so that we can go to the next one. PC enable is a 1 because we want to update it, okay? Even though there's one case where we are not really updating it, but we are really updating it with the same value out of the adder. Okay, that's how it's going to be done. PC mux mux, we said something already. What was it?
1.
A 1, because we want the Z flag. Okay. Okay, let me just put this one out of the way, right there. Okay, the address mux, do we need to access RAM in this case? Nope, we are just changing the program counter, not what it is pointing to. So we put a 0 here. Are we performing any operations in terms of the ALU? Are we adding, subtracting, or doing anything like that?
Yes,
Why?
because you need to get to the actual other side of
You have to see if that's a Z flag or not.
That's
We
a
need to access the Z flag,
Yes.
but does it involve any ALU operation?
The AND gate.
What?
Wait, am I thinking the wrong thing?
Okay,
We did it
wait.
wrong.
Okay, hold on here. Okay, this is the wire that we need to determine whether to branch or not, right? That's the Z flag. It comes out of this splitter, which in return comes out of the ALU and also the register. Well, actually, it feeds into the ALU, but it comes out of the register. So we don't need to exercise. Exercising the ALU does not help us in this case. It doesn't involve the ALU. Yep.
Don't you need to use the ALU to get the Z flag in the first place?
Yeah,
So that's why we have the subtraction and compare instruction. They are the ones who set the flags, but this instruction does not. Well, did I mention anything about subtraction or addition or bit shifting in this instruction? No. Nope. So that's why the ALU is not involved. Okay, so let's just say that there's a confusion and go like, okay, maybe we need to do something with the ALU to change the Z flag. Okay, and then you have to answer the question of which operation should be used to change the Z flag. Which operations can change the Z flag inside the ALU?
Addition, subtraction.
All of them.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Once the output zero, then it makes the Z flag 1.
So that's why it's not, you know, so when you ask the question, then you go like, oh, okay, it doesn't make sense anymore because if we need to use the ALU to set the Z flag, then you have to ask the question, but which operation should be used? Because all operations can affect the Z flag. Now, how do we know that? When you look inside the ALU and you look at the Z flag, this is the Z flag, okay? This is the Z out flag, which is the Z flag. It becomes the Z flag when it comes out. Is it operation specific?
Nope.
Is there any type of multiplexer saying that, oh, let's update the Z flag, but only for these operations?
Nope.
Nope. It looks at the actual output of the ALU and say, whatever it is, use it to determine whether the Z flag should be a 1 or 0.
So does that mean that the Z flag output is passive even if the ALU's not enabled?
If the ALU is not enabled, it will still try to compute the Z flag as the output of the ALU, but it doesn't update the flag register unless you do something. So the flag register is always, you know, outputting the current state of the Z flag according to the register, which is set by the previous instruction that exercised the ALU.
So we're actually getting our value from the register then?
From the from the flags register,
Flags
yes.
register.
So would we need to have ALU enabled or no?
Nope.
That's enough.
Nope. We do not want the ALU to be enabled. Okay, so let's go back here. I just want to finish this. So ALU op does not really matter. Put a 0 here because ALU is not even enabled. Output 1 is useless, so we turn it off. Output 0 is useful, so we need to look at the demux of output 0 and see how we should route it. We needed to route all the way down here, which means we need to specify a 0 for output 0 mux. Okay. So we put a 0 here. Whoops. And this one is just, you know, whichever register we choose to use here. So let's say we pick register C, okay? So we pick register C over here. And register C is going to correspond to 1, 0 in binary, which is a 2 in just a regular decimal number. Yes, we do want to enable it, because otherwise, you know, it's not going to output anything. We are not changing any of the registers, so RI, you know, all the RIs can be zeros. We are not using RAM, so anything relates to RAM can be zeros. And also we are not changing the instruction register itself, so that also is a 0. Okay? Yep.
In my code, I didn't implement your first two, so it wasn't going through RAM to get, to basically increment the program counter. So in mine, each one had to increment the program counter first, and then check the Z flag to see if it would update the register. So basically, my code slices had increment the Z flag. Instead of having an increment at the front when it fetched. But it still worked.
Well, what do you mean by still work? It still branches to the location when the Z flag is a 1, but does it just continue execution with the very next instruction when the Z flag is a 0?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Because I did this exact same thing after it incremented.
but then you'll be skipping the next instruction because you'll be incrementing the program counter one time too many. So, okay, so that's the answer so far. I'm going to go to the lab and continue with this discussion because it will help with our next homework assignment. Yes? Mm-hmm.
So for all 4 cases, you just have to change that one register out 0 select between X, Y, W, and Z, or A, B, C, D.
A, B, C, D, right. Yep, those are the variants.
We did that wrong.